Då så. Då har vi kommit till dagens näst sista programpunkt. På kvällen så har vi ett öppet arrangemang som jag vill puffa för. Det betyder att man inte behöver ha specifik biljett för att kunna komma dit, utan berätta gärna för era vänner och bekanta som kanske inte är här på MR-dagarna men som ändå vill ta del av det. Och det kommer börja klockan 17:30 på kvällen. Men innan dess så har vi sista programpunkten innan vi släpper för allmänheten då. Och detta kommer också vara på engelska. It's about women's and LGBTQ people's rights under attack in Poland. And I will give the word to our moderator for this seminar, which is Katarina Bergehed.
Thank you, and thank you very much for joining us in this seminar, which will discuss several topics: abortion, the situation for LGBTI plus people, the lack of rule of law, activism, resistance, and so on. So let me just do a short introduction before introducing our panel. We have, of course, also one person with us online. Ever since the Law and Justice Party won the elections in Poland in 2015, attacks on women's rights, LGBT plus people's rights has increased year by year. Repeated attempts have been made to restrict the right to abortion, the right to sexuality education and information for young people, attacks on LGBT people's rights. But all these have been met by massive protests, which did successfully force politicians to back down until now. So what we are going to discuss today is what happens when the rule of law is dismantled and courts and the judiciary are used to violate people's rights instead of protecting them. And we will also talk a little bit about what is the situation on the ground, what is the situation for women in need of abortion today, for LGBTI people, for activists and human rights defenders. So with me to discuss these issues, first of all, online, we have Elżbieta Podeszna, who is a prominent human rights defender and activist. We're very happy to have you here, Ella, and in a moment I will let you introduce yourselves as well. And here on my right side is Weronika Śmigilewska, sorry,
No problem.
a pro-abortion activist and a co-organizer of women's strikes in Krakow. And to my further right, I have my dear colleague, Miko Czernicki, Equal Treatment Coordinator for Amnesty International in Poland. So can I start with you, Ella? Just a short introduction of you and your important work in Poland.
Hello, thank you for inviting me here. I started my activity something like 6 years ago after the election results were published because I was conscious that it will be very soon that women's rights, LGBT people rights will be violated. So at first I was involved in women's strikes in Poland. Then we were trying to fight for judiciary, and we had some good results. So I can say that more or less I was involved in all democratic fights against anti-democratic movement which took place in Poland. By profession, I'm psychotherapist, and perhaps that gives me a special force to fight for freedom, because I think that it is one of the crucial virtues which people cannot be isolated from. Now I am mostly concentrated on the rights, on the situation of Polish-Belarusian border and the situation of migrants and also activists who try to help them there.
Thank you so much, Ella. And Veronica, let's move to you.
Yes, so I am also a feminist activist and a pro-abortion activist in Poland. Abortion, this is a topic in which I have engaged, I believe now, for 3 years. Before that, I was mostly co-organizing women's marches in Krakow, and I was also a city activist before that. So a little bit like Ella, I got already involved in a variety of topics, but for maybe reasons that I will mention during our discussion, abortion activism is now particularly important for me, and also I find it particularly satisfying, to be honest.
Thank you, Veronica. And Mikko?
So I'm Mikko, and I've been an activist for 12 years now, with 9 years in Poland in LGBT activism and women's rights activism. At Amnesty, I deal with exactly women's rights and LGBTI rights and anti-discrimination, and looking at how the situation in Poland develops and how it's interconnected, as you said, with independence of judiciary, or right to protest and right to assembly, and how those rights are very much being violated through one another, and we see that the bigger picture is a bit more sad.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Let's head straight on to the questions. And my first question, really, I mean, we could have a seminar where we take all the background and history. We're not going to do that. We're going to start with the very last shocking development in Poland, which was actually last week, I think, when the parliament was discussing yet another law proposal on abortion, a proposal that would actually use the existing criminal codes of involuntarily causing the death of a person, which would then be applied to abortion providers, and another crime which says causing injury to a person, and if this injury is resulting in the person's death, would then be criminalized with 25 years imprisonment or life sentence. And these provisions were going to be applied on abortion, on the women and other pregnant people in need of abortion, but also providers. So let me just hear your reactions to this proposal, and what were the reactions in Poland on the ground?
Well, let's say, of course, this proposal was a total aberration and absurd, but we do need to remember this is just yet another attempt and another step in the struggle that we are facing in Poland, not even since Law and Justice won the election in 2015, but already since the political transformation in Poland. I know we were not supposed to give you the whole political and historical context here, but it is important to remember that it's since 1993 that we have in Poland one of the most restrictive abortion laws in Europe and actually in the world. So the latest attempts are just another point of this story, another attempt to actually make the fetus life the even a more important element than the life of a pregnant person. So these regulations that you mentioned would be this extension, right? So the fetus would be more important than the pregnant person. The good thing, of course, was that this proposal was rejected in the first reading in our parliament, but it, of course, doesn't mean that we are safe now, or that the situation or access to abortion in Poland is not a critical issue. I would say the two main characteristics of abortion regulation in Poland that underlines the actual law is fear and shame. If you talk to people in Poland, they would often be convinced that abortion in Poland is criminalized. We do need to remember a pregnant person in Poland can have an abortion and will not be running a criminal legal risk. If I am pregnant and I want to have an abortion and to do it on my own, I can do it and I can't be persecuted for it. But the criminal system and the law in Poland is now constructed this way that I can't have easily any access to help. The law is constructed the way all the resources like medical staff or any kind of helpers would be feared, would be well, maybe they will not be ashamed, but they are zastraszeni. Harassed, thank you. And to not to help me. So this is, let's say, the main rule of this legal system now in Poland regarding abortion.
Can I just ask you, Ella, what were your reaction to the bill that was discussed last week, and what were among your grassroots activists, what were their reaction?
My personal reaction was that I was very sad that my worst dreams are coming true. And as a psychologist, I can say that, for example, psychological reasons for not being able to carry the pregnancy are completely ignored in Poland. There was very recently a situation where doctors who are supposed to support a woman in situation when the woman was in the law, in the right to have an abortion because of embryopathological reasons, she was refused, and when she psychological crisis, this woman was told that there is not a reason to have an abortion because depression is not a danger enough. So it means that even if a woman has a right to have an abortion, it is very difficult to get it in an official way. So what I'm frightened about is that women are left alone. We'll tell about it, but the only element we can count on is sort of self-help, or a sisterhood, organizations which are grassroots organizations which do not very often include too many doctors, because the doctors are also frightened and are harassed to help women in the way they should do, which is another problem. And it means, and we started to build a sort of the second country, I would say the underground structures, and in the women movement is the most obvious and strong, but also in other very, very important cases of social life, we've got two countries.
Interesting. Let us talk a little bit more about that. But first of all, maybe we should clarify what the abortion law looks like at the moment in Poland.
So before the last sentence of the Constitutional Court that was came out last year and was published in January this year, we had 3 cases when, in theory, a pregnant person could have an abortion. First case was in if the life of the mother, I believe the word is, it's formulated this way in the code. So if the life of the pregnant person is endangered, then the second case is if the pregnancy is the effect of a criminal act, so the rape. And the third case was if the life of if the fetus is damaged the way that it, importantly damaged, let's say. The decision of the Constitutional Tribunal of last year ruled that the third case would not be applied anymore, which means that a pregnant person can learn for even a wanted pregnancy that she would, first of all, she would not have, the baby she wanted, but of course that she can't terminate her pregnancy until the fetus is not, is not dead, let's say, on its own. I would say that for, in the general, the access to abortion in Poland, I know it might sound controversial, but the ruling was not a big change. Because the number of people that to abortion was already huge before that. You need to know also that the 2 other cases, I mean the case of the rape was also practically that low, because a person would have to have a recognized by court sentence about the rape to be able to get an abortion before first 12 of the pregnancy, which with the Polish judiciary system is practically impossible. And of course there are many women that just don't want to be pregnant, and this is the only, let's say, explanation and motivation for us, the abortion activists, and for many people in Poland already. This is a perfectly fine motivation. You don't have to be pregnant if you don't want to be pregnant, and this should be the base to access to abortion. But these cases are just not recognized and not, at all in our healthcare system. So what did change after the ruling, the sentence of the Constitutional Court, is that for abortion activists, a whole new chapter started, the chapter of the also psychological work with women that wanted to become mothers. And now, not only our state not only leaves alone girls and women and pregnant people that just didn't want to get pregnant or be pregnant, but also this new group of people that are forced to travel abroad, maybe in 23rd, 24th week of their pregnancies, knowing that if they go to a hospital and the medical staff recognizes the fetus is damaged, you won't give birth to a healthy child. We can't do anything because the heart is still beating. And this is particularly the case that we had recently. You may have heard about this. We had a 30-year-old woman, Isabella, who was pregnant. And after a minor accident, her water broke, of course, before, ahead of time. And she went to a hospital, and she was informed that there is nothing they can do about, she won't give birth to a child. The fetus won't survive. They know that for sure, but it's not dead yet. So they are not going to do anything. So what happened then? After she was practically dying in the hospital, she was texting her mother hour after hour, saying that they won't even measure my temperature. I had to bring my own thermometer with me. I have 39.9 degrees now. I feel worse and worse, but they won't do anything because of the abortion regulations. They are scared. They are waiting till it dies. I hope I don't get sepsis. She did. When the fetus died and the medical staff finally decided to take it out, she died after a few hours because of sepsis.
So in summary, even in the cases where abortion is legal, it's difficult to actually access abortion. And Mikko, I believe in the legal cases of abortion, severe fetal impairment was a large share of the legal abortions that were made before the Constitutional Tribunal's decision.
Yes, severe and fatal fetal impairment was about 95% of all the abortions, all the officially registered abortions in Poland before. And as we learn about other clauses, it's only a couple a year. So, for example, under the rape, as Veronica already mentioned, it was 1 or 2 a year that managed to get through the process. So the majority of people go outside the system, as was already said. And we can see that now in numbers a bit better because abortion activists actually monitor how many people they've helped. And we've seen that over the years since the ruling, they helped 34,000 people to get an abortion or to get either through information how to get abortion pills from abroad or how to go abroad to get an abortion. So it's very interesting to see that just one group that helps with that, helps and provides that information, already managed to track 34,000, whereas the Polish government for years said that it's about 1,000 abortions per year.
Very interesting, and that leads us a little bit back to what you were talking about, Ella. There are two societies, there are underground activities and help in providing abortions and so on. So can I ask all of you, I mean, we normally state as one of the arguments when we talk about the right to abortion, that criminalization do not put an end to abortion. It just makes them more difficult to access and more dangerous. Is that true in current Poland? What would you say, any of you? Shall we start with you, Ella?
Yes, of course, it will exist. It will exist. Abortion will exist till the end of the world. And women and people who need abortion will do that, will find a way. Unfortunately, it's much more dangerous. Although abortion in Poland was always very much medicalized, so the doctors were very reluctant to agree that the self-abortion is a sort of relatively safe procedure. But of course, there is an amount of women who would need medical help after I mean the pharmacological abortion. And now women will be in real problems when they come to the hospital and it can be somehow proved that they try to do the abortion. I mean that definitely some of them will be sort of asked and reviewed how they got this help and so on and so on. So I'm afraid that also because the atmosphere of sort of harassment and fear, a lot of women would try to avoid the contact with hospitals and with doctors because although it is not true that a woman would be punished if she does the abortion, because this law which was discussed failed. I mean, at this point it failed. But there is a big mess in information, so a lot of women, I think, would find themselves, in a sense, pushed to carry the pregnancy, or will avoid contact with hospitals and doctors when needed.
Mm. And Veronica, I know that you are part of a grassroots movement called the Abortion Dream Team. What are the role of civil society in helping women access abortion today?
Yes, so Abortion Dream Team is an organization that launched in Poland a network of, as Ella already named it, self-help and solidarity in abortion. And so I am proud to call myself an Abortion Dream Team hooligan, so I'm not like in the group, but I am part of this network, and I agree with Ella that we have a parallel state now in Poland, but I don't agree that it's underground. The strength, one of the biggest, for me, strengths of this network is that it's up and running. We have articles in media, we have a hotline launched 2 years ago now, and the coalition of organizations called Abortion Without Borders. And this coalition regroups, on the one hand, organizations in Poland that help people that need abortion, and on the other hand, we have organizations around the world, mostly for instance, Abortion Support Network in UK, Abortion Network Amsterdam in Amsterdam, and also other organizations called aunties, like in Berlin, Vienna, Frankfurt, and a few others, who are helping to organize travels abroad to have procedures there. I would say the main missions of Abortion Dream Team are the same that for other abortion movements. So we have 3 Ds. Destigmatization. This is why speaking in public is so important, that abortion is normal, abortion is okay. we can have different emotions after abortion. The main one is relief. More than 60% of people after abortion tells that this is the main emotion they feel, not regret. For instance. Second, demedicalization. So also Ella was mentioning it. We need to take abortion out from hands of medical staff. Abortion was here before healthcare was installed. Women were helping each other, using different tools, even like herbal methods. Of course, today we can just use pills at home or at our friends. Someone can just hold our hand and we can have abortions watching Netflix, for instance. And I mean, of course, this there will be some situations in which we need to go to hospital, but in case of medical abortion, it will only be like 2%. And the third, of course, is decriminalization. So we do need to change the law, and Abortion Dream Team is also now part of a larger coalition with also leftist politicians that and other organizations like Women's Strike and also Federa, another feminist organization in Poland for women's and family planning. And they prepared a proposal for a law to change abortion regulations in Poland to first make it legal and available until 12th week for anyone who just needs it. And also introducing some other minor changes to the codes. But for now, we are finishing the collection of signatures, knowing that presenting this this proposal at our parliament, of course, will be a tough moment and will probably engender another debate, and this is the important part of it. For myself, I, of course, don't have much hope that it will pass now. But we do also need to remember that in Argentina it took, I believe, 11 attempts to finally liberalize the law, and I still believe that it will also happen in Poland.
So what you are mentioning now really is the kind of citizens' initiatives where you collect enough signatures and then the law proposal has to be discussed by the parliament. That is a method that also the anti-rights groups have used a lot, Mikko, not only when it comes to abortion. And I would like to move on a little bit in the conversation because these groups do not only target pregnant people's right to abortion, but also a number of other issues, such as the right to information and sexuality education, and LGBTQI plus people's rights and so on. Can you describe to us a little bit about these anti-rights groups? Who are they? What are the narratives they use? What are the tactics and so on?
Yeah, those groups, as you mentioned, are using very often the citizens' initiatives, and I think main reason why they're doing that is because they want to push their narrative onto the streets. And this is the situation that is with abortion. For example, they have this buses driving around the country with either calling abortion a murder or presenting activists like Abortion Dream Team as murderers there and associating them. But they also have buses going around the country talking about LGBT people being pedophiles. So they use this opportunity of collecting signatures to have the right to use that kind of narrative in the public space, to be present at various central places in bigger cities in Poland. But what is also important is they are not only in bigger cities. And we saw really the rise of them 10 years ago. In 2012, 2013, they've already started going around the country and talking about gender ideology in the context of Istanbul Convention, for example, and tying over the LGBTI rights and women's rights and saying that this is against family traditions, against family values, and against family rights. And what are they proposing instead is family rights. So, for example, in Poland, they've attacked LGBTI rights, they've attacked women's rights, they attack the Istanbul Convention. And they want to propose a new convention that basically strips people from their rights and puts the rights in the hand of the father. And it says straight away in various documents that they've listed that only the father figure in the family has those rights, and only a full family with father, mother, and children is an acceptable cell of the society that is good enough to have rights. And we saw, for example, on a local level, that those documents were not only excluding LGBTI people, LGBTI families, but were also excluding single mothers, families that were of divorced parents, families with mother and grandmother, for example, supporting the family. So any other non-traditional, in their way, family cell was excluded. So really the narrative is there of those family values and family rights and how important the family is. But the truth is that it's a very narrow view of what a family is and very narrow view of what rights are. And they push it under the ideology, under re-stigmatizing and making a monster out of various human rights.
Can I turn to you then, Ella? Then we know a little bit more about the anti-rights groups, their tactics, their goals, their narrative. But what role does the government and the ruling party play in relation to this? And what role does the church have?
I would say that the church has got one of the major roles. Catholic Church has got the special privileges in Poland, which are reflected, among the others, in the access to media. Our Catholic Church has got very strong radio and TV station. So it means that they've got a sort of easy access to a number of people. And when the main public TV follows the same line, it means that other sources, other social powers has got a very limited access to the promotion of, for example, scientific sources of their opinions. It can be seen also during the pandemic time, yes, that these radios and TV stations present not only, not necessarily the scientific point of view. So when the church has got at its disposal a strong radio and TV station, it's obvious that it will be flattered by the party which wants to win the election. Yes, so because it will be a sort of another, how to say, loud speaking and promoting the politicians. And it always happens before the election, but not only before the election, that the members of the governing party goes to this Catholic radio and TV and makes good friends with its chiefs and promotes themselves. So when we say about collecting signatures under the projects of the very conservative and anti-rights bills, they are sometimes collected at the churches. After the masses, when people go out, they are handed out the projects of these bills. Of course, not everywhere, but it also gives the picture how the politician uses the faith and the religion in Poland. You must also remember that a big amount of Polish people has no access to other private TV stations, and they create the vision of the world basing on the public TV. And when it is dominated by anti-right politicians and movements, it gives you the picture how Polish society is manipulated and stipulated to this radical right side. So it is told by the old communists that who's got information, he's got power, yes? And the governing party and the church follows this sentence very, very carefully and unfortunately successfully.
Thank you. And one of the areas where we also have seen this is, like we said, the access to sexuality education, for example. Last year, the Polish parliament also discussed a bill that would prohibit sexuality education. It was an initiative from one of these anti-rights groups. But even before this, if you can tell us a little bit, Mikko, about this so-called Stop Pedophilia law, but also what has happened on the municipality levels with the so-called LGBT-free zones.
Yeah, so as you're saying, the criminalization, in fact, of sexuality education, and the Stop Pedophilia bill and now the Stop LGBT bill, those three bills are still there, still in the parliament, frozen in the committee, but as you said, they all citizens' initiatives. As Ella said, they were collected in churches around Poland, that we have a map of, thanks to some activists. But what is really important is that those bills are nearly exact copies of the bill in Russia, the bill in Lithuania, or the bill in Hungary. So we can see that those movements are connected together, interconnected together, and they want to do the same damage in various countries. And those bills are criminalizing sexuality education, but in such a broad manner that, for example, my work could potentially be criminalized if I speak about LGBT rights in public. If I do a campaign on LGBTI rights, that will be criminalized if a minor sees that. As we saw in Hungary, putting an advertisement or bringing a book about LGBTI rights is already a criminal offense, and the same thing could happen in Poland with those bills. But it also gives a chilling effect to any teachers that want to teach anti-discrimination at school, want to include the issues of sexual diversity in school. They are already being scared, and the government is supporting that. Is not publishing those bills, not putting those bills through yet, but at the same time, the Ministry of Education is already stating that those kind of topics should not be covered in schools. And, for example, superintendents are monitoring schools that take part in various actions supporting LGBTI rights or supporting women's strike, for example. And you mentioned the LGBT-free zones. This is the same source. It's from the same group of organizations that started first putting the LGBT-free zones. Later on, as they saw that that kind of naming is unfortunate a bit to them and could turn against them, they changed it to family rights zones. Again, the same narrative. And what those bills actually do, like on one hand, we could say they're just a declaration. But when you look deeper, it's a declaration that says it's okay to exclude LGBT people. It's okay to exclude people that are different from the norm that we established. And this already happened. So we know of a gay man in one of the towns that was denied access to a pharmacy to buy his medicine because he's gay, and this is LGBT-free zone. We know of a foundation that works in that area that was denied access to a cultural center to do a movie screening because they will not be promoting LGBT ideology in those areas. So we know that that kind of things are happening, although they try to say that, oh, this is just a declaration, we just want to strengthen the family. But the truth is, they want to exclude part of the society, and they want to restrict access to information, they want to restrict the right to education of people, and they want the society to follow their agenda and follow what they are thinking, and keep within those really narrow brackets of patriarchal society.
Thank you. Let's move a little bit and talk about the resistant activism, but also lack of rule of law in Poland. And I was just wondering, Veronica, has the feminist movement in Poland and the LGBTI plus movement in Poland joined hands? And why or why not?
I would say it changes for better, but it's not yet, we are not yet there. I feel within the abortion movement that, and with the debates, not only Abortion Dream Team launched, but that was recently launched in Poland around this topic, we start to see the intersectionality of it, right? So that it's not just, that's not just a question of changing law if still we won't recognize that trans people can also need abortion. And if they stay out of our healthcare system, the issue won't be solved. Similarly, that the issue won't be solved if we don't recognize that we have people still outside of the healthcare system because they don't have a stable contract and they are not entitled to social security. If we don't recognize this is also a class issue and that wealthy people are have easier access to abortion, of course, that people with less money, but also with less social and cultural capital, let's say. So, and on the other hand, I feel that LGBTI and queer people in general in Poland are a real source of energy and solidarity, and like I feel we can all learn from this movement. I remember riots back 2 years ago when I just saw what happened in the streets and what slogans and what topics were brought up, and I really I hoped that the whole feminist movement in Poland would just learn from this. And I feel the abortion movement starts to have this starts also this debate and have this reflection on that we need to have joint hands, and of course we need to bring rainbow flags. I know this is just a symbol, but like that's important to be there for each other. But we do also have the debate with, I would say, between generations sometimes of the feminist movement, and we still have to learn to be there and to. Well, I don't know how it's the situation in Sweden now, and if the TERF movement is already here as well, and maybe I will just. So TERF means trans exclusionary radical feminist. Basically, these are feminists that believe that they would like to exclude trans people from the movement. And we also started to have, unfortunately, this debate and these arguments in Poland. So this is particularly why I can't say we are not always joining hands, because we have this and we need to face this issue as well. But yeah, as for the abortion network, I feel that we are joining hands often, and I'm proud of it.
Very good. And you talked about riots, all the violence that have and harassment that have met peaceful protesters during the last years, the number of changes in law and in policy that has really sort of shrunken the space also for peaceful protest, assembly, and so on. 1 year on, what does it look like in Poland today? What does the resistance look like, and what is it met by? Veronica, Mikko, what are you facing at the moment? And I will soon get back to you, Ella.
I would say that 1 year on, the issue still persists. We see now that those people that were arrested, were beaten during the protests last year, are still facing charges in the courts, are still investigated by the police. And the police, even though some courts already said that those were illegal arrests, the police still pursues after other people. And what is more concerning is, as you mentioned, we should be a bit talking about independence of judiciary. And we see that it's starting to take a toll. And some of the judges already issue verdicts that are more on the police side than on the human rights side. And I would say that also what is important is that we now see a new wave of criminalization, and we see a new wave of investigation and harassment that is happening against abortion activists, that is happening against activists at the border that Ella mentioned. So we know that the government is still against the civil society, is still against human rights defenders, and is still trying to harass them one way or another. And probably Ella will tell a bit more about her case, but we know that the prosecutor's office is still against those that want to have their free speech respected and freedom of assembly respected.
Yes. I'll get back to you, Veronica, but I think it's a nice bridge to actually talk to you, Ella, because you do have first-hand experience of what happens when rule of law is dismantled and the judiciary is used to violate people's rights instead of protecting them. I believe at least at one stage there were 14 different proceedings against you in relation to your peaceful activism, and you have been under constant police surveillance, and just the day after tomorrow you will stand in a trial for offending religious beliefs, the same crime that you and 2 other women have been acquitted for earlier this year. Could you tell us a little bit about what you have been facing? I believe the latest, the offending religious belief case started more than 2 years ago in May 2019. Could you please share your experience, what you have been facing as a human rights defender?
Yes, that's true that at some point I had these 14 cases and most of them are already closed, luckily. But what I observe now is that the prosecutors want to punish human rights defenders in any way, you know. So most of my cases are closed, but some of them are still going on because the prosecutor appeals to the higher courts. So the day after tomorrow, we've got the second phase of our process. So we are to defend ourselves, to explain our motives, and so on, because both the private prosecutors who felt offended and also the state prosecutor thought that the verdict of the first instance court was not fair, and that we did offend religious feelings.
And could you just describe, what was the actual action that you had taken that was so offensive to the religious beliefs?
Yes, we used the picture of a very famous icon of so-called Black Madonna, and it received a rainbow halo over the head of Christ, little Christ, and Madonna as well. And after a very homophobic action, which was done by the priest in one of the churches in Poland, we decided to distribute these pictures all around the city. And for that, I was detained, and then 3 of us faced these consequences. So it is not about religion. It is about homophobia. And it is very interesting to say that one of these private prosecutors is the lady who is the leader of anti-choice movement and who is one of the authors of this proposal of punishing women. And also the lawyer of the priest who felt offended is the leader of the most fierce anti-right organization Ordo Juris in Poland. So it gives the example how all these things are interwoven, and how influential these organizations try to be and unfortunately are. So I've got now 2 so-called, how to say it, cassatia? The final, when you are declared not guilty, for example, and this is the sort of the final phase after 2 levels of judiciary, then the prosecutor, the main prosecutor of Poland, the Prosecutor General, can refer to the Supreme Court to, how to say, wipe off the verdicts of these lower courts. So in my case, I've got already 2 of that, where the Prosecutor General said that the verdicts were too soft for me and that I have to be punished. And this is something which we observe now, which happens quite often to the most, visible figures of human rights defenders. And it happens now like that it is very seldom when the prosecutors are satisfied with the verdict of the courts of the first instance. So they usually push it if it is not on their, which is not too severe, they would push it through all the levels of judiciary system in Poland until we are punished somehow.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, our time is running out. We have these time signs everywhere here now telling us to wrap up. We don't have any time for questions from the audience, I'm afraid. But I would like to ask the audience to send their support and their strong support for your struggle and for you on Wednesday, Ella. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.